set too high?
It was really up there, wait. Yeah, it was, then I went too low, didn't I? That was way up there.
Throw up, young
You have a,
throw up.
Yeah, I mean, it answered the question. We were trying to figure out if there was
I
anything
got the softest hands.
crazy.
No. The only time I work in there, I get blisters.
It's because you don't do it enough.
I don't think we could use it.
No, I mean, this, you start by seeing the land of the building, but I did all kinds of searches with that, and then, but it was here, this is like 81. Nothing for 420, and then this one was completely separate, and this was in the 19. So,
Yeah, I would say we can't use it. I agree, that was helpful to tell me that we can't go here. Because we were trying to like find it without creating fun, then we ended up doing this for fun.
I'm just hoping somebody in the audience doesn't decide to make this thing out of tonight.
Um, 12.
was there anyone else that wanted to speak to it?
Was that the 98, isn't it? Yes.
Name, address, you don't have to put them.
Yeah, it's 98.
No.
Where? This? I know, I'm a It's on me too. That was when I kept asking him. I'm compulsive. Stupid. I can't help it.
We good? I now call the Norton City Regular Council meeting to order Monday, October 22nd, 2018. Time is 7 p.m. Would you please rise for Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent prayer? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Gaynor?
Here.
Mr. McClone?
Here.
Mr. Carrot?
Here.
Mr. Towsley?
Here.
Ms. Whipke?
Here.
Mr. Kernan?
Here.
Mr. Pelot?
Here. We have communications from the public, and this evening we have Chelsea Finney here from Summit County Children's Services to speak a little bit on their levy that they're looking to pass.
Thank you. Again, my name is Chelsea Finney. I am legal counsel for Summit County Children's Services. And first of all, I want to thank the City of Norton for all the support that we've had during this past levy cycle. We've actually had a tremendous amount of support from Norton. We were able to participate in the Apple Cider Parade a few weeks ago. And the citizens were wonderful. They, were very receptive to us. They thanked us for, for serving the community. So I appreciate, all of your constituents in that effort. But I'm here today to talk to you about issue 8, coming on the ballot here in 15 days, but no one's counting. The first thing that people want to know is, how much more am I going to have to pay for this? How much are my taxes going to rise? And I can tell you that someone much better at math than me figured it out. and it's going to cost the average taxpayer for a $100,000 home about $35 extra a year. That breaks it down to about 10 cents a day. We are going on for a 2.25 mil renewal with a 1 mil increase. We have not had an increase in our levy in the past 30 years. So to put that into perspective, I'm 29 years old. In my lifetime, there has not been an increase in the funds that Children's Services has received. We've actually lost money. When the property values took a hit, we actually decreased our values. And what most people don't know is as the property values rise back up, our levy does not rise with it. So we've lost about $60 million in the past 10, 15 years. We have had an increase of 36% in children that we have served. Last year alone, we served 1 in every 12 children in the county. I can tell you that our custody numbers are hovering at about 750 kids. That kind of wavers every day. I know today we filed some complaints, so that number could go up. At the same time, the courts are returning children home, which is great, so they kind of fluctuate. We are servicing about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,100 kids at a time. That could be kids that are living with relatives, children that are actually returned home but we're still providing services to, and then of course children that are actually in our custody. We are able right now to place 40% of children with relatives, which is really great. That's what we're aiming for. The number of children in residential care is going down as well. So we're able to really work to service those kids and keep them with their families and keep them out of foster care because we are at a low foster care right now. We need foster parents. You know, we've had, everyone's heard of the opioid epidemic, and that has really hit Summit County pretty hard. That's where a lot of our increases have come from in children, and we really need the support. I hate to think that if this levy fails, what's going to happen, but the stark reality that is if this levy does fail, we will be losing 20% of our budget, and 34% of our staff will be cut pretty much overnight. And that's about 112 employees that will lose their jobs as a result of the levy decreasing or failing. Again, you know, we serviced 11,000 phone calls last year, got called in to our hotline that we service. So the volume is high. The staff is not, you know, we've been able to maintain our staff. We've not been able to hire as much as we need to, but we're hoping that with the levy pass and increase, we'll be able to hire some more staff so they can kind of be able to better service and maintain their caseloads. Does anyone have any questions about issue 8?
I think I did see in the paper, it starts in January, but I don't think you'll start collecting until 2020, right?
Correct.
That's what I thought.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question. Back in like November, December, we had the opioid litigation pack, for lack of a better word. I didn't get a chance to look up the legislation on it. Are you guys a part of that? Did you join it?
I don't know that 100%. I'm not involved in that. I know that we've been collecting information, but I'm not sure what our total involvement is with that.
Because we actually passed where we were supportive of it, and we would be a part of civil cases, right?
Right. Yeah.
Against the pharmaceutical companies, and maybe could recoup some money.
Yeah,
So that's what I was curious
Children's
about.
Service Board is a component member of Summit County, and the
Right.
county has joined that litigation. And I know through the Sheriff's Department, Children's Services, the Juvenile Court, they have a number of sources that they're pulling all their information from to collect for that lawsuit. So whether they're directly named in a lawsuit, I don't believe so. I believe it's just the county who's doing that on their behalf. But I know they are providing information based on what I've seen.
It seems like they should be, since
Right.
they've been impacted so well. You ought to have a special line right
Yeah.
there.
It's part of the
for
cost.
that.
I mean, it's part of the, when they were gathering costs in the communities, that was part of the cost that they were looking at. So.
I had another question too. I was reading about something online the other day, and I come across a legal site that they were saying that, like, undocumented illegal aliens here, if the ICE was to come and take possession of the parents, put them, incarcerate them, and somehow any of their children would be sent to Summit County Children's Services. Is that true?
We do have children that are, I mean, I don't know the legal status of their parents, but I know we do service immigrant children in our community. We have a huge Nepalese population in Summit County, and so I know we do service those children. What the parents' immigrant status is, though, I'm not aware of.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Anybody from the audience?
I don't have a question, but I will say that in my position at Summit County Juvenile Court, I work with Children's Services every day. They do a fantastic job managing their money, making good use of the money that they have. They really are on a shoestring budget here, folks. And they are the defense for the children in this county. Children who are abused and neglected, that's the agency who takes care of those kids. And if they're not funded, I shudder to think what's going to happen to some of these kids that I have seen some cases that are just horrifying. So I early voted today. I voted for your levy, and I would suggest everybody votes for their levy.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, these children really do need our support. I mean, I see these cases day in and day out, and, you know, these children, when they come into the agency, some of them have no one and nothing. So they really, you know, they do need the support of the county. I feel very strongly about this issue number 8. I've worked with the county Children's Services now for a couple of years, and, you know, the amount of work that our caseworkers and our staff are doing is tremendous, as Mr. Kernan pointed out. And, you know, they need our support. The children need our support. The workers need the support of the county behind them as well. And, you know, we really do appreciate the support of everyone in helping support this issue. So thank you.
Thank you. Brad? Garrett? No, you're fine. Please state your name and address for the stenographer. You have 5 minutes.
Brad Garrett. I actually live in Barberton, 750 North Summit Street. I apologize. I'm a little unfamiliar with your forum here. Can I engage in conversation with you, or are you simply here to listen to what I have
It's
to say?
more just to listen. Like if you have a issue or something, you can just talk.
Okay. I guess I had more general conversation. I'm more familiar with the way that things go about, and I was in committee meeting the way it works at Barberton. In regards to the photo speed tickets that are being issued, I was curious, and this was a question that I was hoping to ask the chief of police. How are these contested? Does anyone know?
Mr. Murphy should be able to.
Those, well, which one of you two like?
Yeah,
to-
I mean, there's instructions on if anyone receives a violation, you'll receive a notice in the mail. There's instructions for a number to call to file an appeal on that notice of violation.
So it says on the ticket itself, failure to timely contest this ticket or submit an affidavit, I'm assuming an affidavit of truth, is deemed to be an admission of liability. Liability is because this is a civil matter, correct? Not a criminal matter, and not a citing under the Ohio Revised Code.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So what are the means of appeal? It's not through the court system then. It is through a third party.
There's an ordinance in place with an administrative appeal. If you call the number and indicate that you're willing to file an appeal and follow the procedures, there will be a hearing at City Hall, and it's all provided for in the council's ordinance that they passed.
Who is overseeing the hearing itself? Is it a judge? Is it a magistrate?
It's a hearing officer.
From this company?
No.
From the city?
Yeah. Is there a point to all these questions?
I'm just trying to figure out the legal process. No one up to this point has been able to provide an answer, at least that I've been able to hear, including the chief of police, who we've actually left messages with. I was actually driving down North Summit Street to Wadsworth Road the other day. And the whole reason, I mean, this was my first encounter, I guess, with anything in regards to this situation. I came up on the Norton truck, the Dare truck, parked facing me in my direction of travel, in my right-of-way. parked facing the opposite direction in violation of the Ohio Revised Code. No vehicle, including emergency vehicles, unless responding to an emergency, is allowed to park facing traffic. So I just wanted to ask the chief, is that common practice to park facing traffic on a thoroughfare in attempts to catch speeders on an overpass?
Chief isn't here right now.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of a moot point for me to even continue then, I guess, because all of these questions would be posed to him, but have yet to actually receive a phone call back from him on multiple messages left, and apparently he doesn't show up for council meetings either.
On the back of the tickets there is instructions on how to file for the appeal, the process.
Okay, I guess, but no one has an answer in regards to the individual and their standing as far as being a public official or an elected official, how the hearing process would take place. But it does take place here, not by a judge, but by someone else.
Right. Correct.
But we don't know who that person is.
It would probably
No, we know who the person is, right? And the procedures set forth in the ordinance, right? It's not a big secret. It was an ordinance that came before council. It's on the city's website. If you receive a violation, there's a website you visit to file your appeal. So all that procedure is in place. And that's why it sounds like you're trying to go somewhere with the question.
No, I'm trying to ask a question. Yeah. I'm trying to ask a question about the process, and no one's been able to answer that question. If it's in the ordinance, I would love to see that in the ordinance in regards to their standing in regards to hearing civil cases, if it's a civil case, because I don't see how it could be anything else. And I guess the next question would be, if someone just didn't pay this ticket, what is the next step in the process as far as this company is concerned? Does it go to, is there interest that's then incurred on the ticket, or are we talking about possible suspension of a license, or what is gone about as far as that's concerned, should someone choose not to comply with this civil citing, I guess I would call it?
I mean, it's in the ordinance, so I don't know what else to say. I don't want to go piece by piece through it. I don't have it from memory, so.
If you want, you
No,
can
I appreciate it.
look online. You should be able to find it. If not, you're welcome to call the council clerk, and she'll be able to get the
I
ordinance
appreciate
for
that.
you.
Did you want to leave a copy of what you're?
No, I do not. I can either speak with you afterwards, and maybe you might be able to provide me with the exact city ordinance number or what have you that maybe is a little bit more descriptive.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
And it's not, just for the record, it's not that the chief did not show up tonight. The chief
I'm
was
sorry,
not
yeah, and
requested.
I'm sorry to insinuate
Okay.
that.
Okay,
It's
but-
just, it's, you know, they say to call, they say to ask, you know, reach out to the chief, try to figure out what's going on. I don't think that they're getting back to anyone.
Okay.
That's just my personal
Thank you.
take on it. Thank you.
And for the record, the ordinance is 72, 2018. There's a number.
That's as it sits on the books right now? Or
Yes. You can pull from the council's website. Council website maintains all the past legislation.
Thank you, sir.
And as the mayor said, the chief is not required to come to these meetings, so that's why he's not here. All right, moving on. We have committee of the whole. We have a proposal to offer support for the Children's Services, issue 8. And I'd like to add that to tonight's council agenda with emergency waiving the second and third readings. This organization, obviously, you know, as it's been stated, this is the protection for the kids when there's no one else there to protect them. They need to have somebody there in their corner, and that's what this organization does. So they definitely offer a good service for those in need. And, you know, by supporting it, it's not telling anybody how to vote on this. It's just saying that we believe that it's a good organization, well respected, and does a great job and a great service for our children.
Is that a second? You need a motion and second? Or?
Need a second. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Motion and second to add this to tonight's agenda, waiving second and third with the emergency. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes.
I know that you just stated that by putting this out there and voting for it as a council person, we're not telling people how to vote, but supporting it, we're saying it's a good thing to vote for. And not saying that we don't need you, not saying that you don't do a good job. I just don't feel that levies out just as a school levy. I don't feel that our school levy has any place being on this council and for us voting to support it. And this is another levy that I don't think that we should be having before us to say that we support it, because we can sit here and say that, but everybody's going to interpret that we actually do support and want to see people vote for it. And it's not my job to tell people how to vote.
Mr. President, if I may,
Yes.
I mean, I'll say it. I think people should vote for it. I mean, I just got done saying that earlier. I mean, why tiptoe around it? That's why they're here. They're asking for our support as elected officials to support their levy. This is an important service. This is something that needs to be done, in my estimation. So, I mean, I'll be right up front and absolutely. Obviously, I can't tell someone how to vote. They go into the voting booth and they vote. But I certainly am going to suggest that they vote for it.
If I could say something.
Yes.
I have interacted with Children's Services many times over the years as a pharmacist, and also our family has had contact with them over the years. We sometimes forget that Summit County includes Norton, and we benefit greatly as a city from Children's Services. We don't have the high-income people only. We have a lot of folks that are on Medicaid, don't have much, and families that have had a lot of problems with addiction, parents that have been lost, lives lost. We need someone to take care of these kids, and some of these kids are ours. I think endorsing it is well worth it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. President, I just, as usual, along with Ms. Whipke, I appreciate educating the people. I appreciate that. And I will vote to move this forward so council can have a voice. But it's my job to represent my voters. And what if the voters turn around and say no, then I've misrepresented my voters, in my opinion. I don't know how they're going to vote. I leave that up to them. So I will abstain, as I usually do, when the time comes.
Anyone else? A lot of the residents look to the council members for advice, for clarity on whether or not certain ordinance is good for the city and good for the residents, and certain items on the ballot, if they're good for the city, for the longevity of the city, and also to benefit the residents. And that's what we're providing here, that we've done our homework, we understand this organization and the service that they provide, and truly believe that there is a need for this service, and basically that we're endorsing this need for this service. How an individual votes, that's up to them. But if somebody hasn't done their homework and they have respect for you as a council person, then they look at that you've done the homework for them. Many people read the ordinances outside of this council and a handful of people throughout the city. Not a whole lot. So they look to us for that guidance. And that's kind of what we are as the elected officials. So for that reason, I will also be supporting this. All right, roll call.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Carrot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Next item on tonight's agenda, or under committee of the whole, is an ordinance establishing Fund 200. These next three kind of go together, establishing the funds. And Mr. Messner, would you like to address all three of them at the same time?
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, Fund 200 is something that the city is moving towards. Presently, on various budgets, we have what's council's aware of as severance pay. When a person retires, we budget for severance in those lines. A number of cities basically set up a fund to put compensated absences, and which would necessitate a 27th pay. Excuse me. And all these severance budgets are actually placed in that fund.
Yeah, the idea is it's a one-time item, but it's a recurring item. So there's payroll years where we have 27th pays, and we know that there's severance payouts upon retirement. They don't happen every year, but sometimes they happen in waves. And this allows us to budget in one place and to provide a reserve there, to put some funds in there year to year to build up a reserve, so that when you get hit in one year, you have the money there to anticipated, collected, and ready to go to do it. You're not caught flat-footed.
Fund 511 is actually a capital account. It's for Eastern Road Waterline. There is we're seeking a loan for that project, and according to state audit procedures, whenever you have a state loan, you have to have a separate fund for that particular project. Hence, we're establishing 511 for the Eastern Road Waterline project. Fund 201, we're setting up an economic development fund. In that particular fund, we will actually create a couple of new accounts, which we'll discuss more during the budget process, but one is for real estate purchases, and another will be for a revolving loan fund that will be placed in that particular account. If at all possible, I really would like to get the consent of council. You're after me for the budget. I need to budget for these items in these particular funds, and I would really like to get some kind of a nod from council tonight, whether or not they're in favor or they're not in favor, so that if you are in favor, I can get these set up and get budget books prepared and have them ready to go, hopefully by next week.
Ron, on the 27th pay, a great idea on this, because Summit County got hit on this many years. And do you know when the next 27th pay is?
Well, I think by,
Do you know what year it is?
It's like maybe Robert does.
It occurs every 11 years.
Olivia, okay.
It's every 11 years. I don't know the last time it occurred, but it's...
I assume your game plan
I
is,
think it's 16.
when we do the budget, you're going to put some money in it every year to cover for that.
that's correct. This year, I'm actually budgeting for a potential of 4 employees that have indicated that they might retire.
Okay.
And so rather than, and it's fairly expensive.
Right.
Several of these people have been around 30-plus years, so it's quite a little bit of money. So basically, I will fund that account from the general fund, and I'll be back to council to ask for, transfer permission to fund these accounts. All except 511, that will be funded by the loan. Other questions?
Yeah, with that 11 years, I would say, however, when that next one comes, maybe we should divide how many years are left to make sure we have enough in there for that.
Yeah.
Because that's a big hit. That's a good idea doing this, so I think I like that idea, so.
Anyone else have any comments or questions on this?
I do, Mr. President.
Yes.
On the Fund 511 for the water line, I think that's it. Yeah, the establishment for the water line. We are looking to get grants on this, correct? And we haven't heard, or have we?
Grant loan combination. It'd
Grant-
be a combination. Yeah, we won't be able to get the entire thing funded through a grant. So it's, I think the certification was for, I don't even want to speak to it. Ron would know, but it's for a combination. We have received some preliminary data as to where we stand, but we have not received notification as to whether or not we have received the funding. We may not get any funding.
Okay, back in March when we talked about this, we were looking at 848,000 just for this project?
That estimate's going to end up being quite high. It's probably going to be in the low 600s at this point. We're still in discussions with Barberton as to how big the water line should be, and there's some final details that have not been established. So I can just say they have serious concerns with the size water line they initially requested. So we're looking at a smaller water line, which then reduces the cost significantly. I think it would go from 700,000 to about 500, but I don't want to say for sure what those numbers are.
And then my last question was, we had talked about Dana Miller wanting the water line on Hametown. Is that still a part of this project?
Yes. And we have some other discussions that are ongoing with some other potential developers. If those developments happen, we will be able to complete that loop in a rather short order, and it'd be necessary in order to create some redundancy in the system. A lot of these projects hinge on other projects, and as you all have heard from me on countless occasions, the one development, should it occur, we've already discussed the amount of investment and the potential revenue to be generated for the TIF for the project. So when we meet with developers, we're already talking about how much investment they're going to put in our community.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Can I move through all three?
That's fine with me, yeah.
I'd like to move all three of these to tonight's agenda, given that it's just setting up the fund. It's not actually putting dollars into the funds at this point, and beneficial for Mr. Messner and his group to be able to get us the budget so we can start discussing that. I would ask that we waive second and third
Emergency?
with emergency.
I'll second.
We're just working through logistics. You're adding it to tonight's agenda, correct? You're adding it to tonight's agenda for first reading? Okay.
And going to
First
waive the
reading,
second and
waiving
third.
second and third with the emergency.
Okay.
Does that work?
We just need to probably get some numbers.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Anyone else?
I'm sorry, the second was Ms. Whipke?
Yes. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Next item under committee of the whole.
Before we go on, if I could,
Yeah.
do we have copies of these ordinances?
Well, that's what we were just talking about. I mean,
mean,
our expectation, so just to be clear, I think Ron said at the beginning, what we were asking for is we have some time to actually pass the ordinances to establish the funds. Mr. Messner can create the funds in our accounting software now, but he didn't want to do that if council was going to, because it's harder to get rid of the funds than it is to create them. So if council was okay with the concept, I think he was going to make it in the accounting system with the understanding that at the next meeting, you can go ahead and pass the ordinance if that's your pleasure.
That's fine, provided you can go ahead and put them into the budget, even though they're not passed.
That's kind of what I'm looking for you all to, I mean,
Yeah.
if a majority of you say, no, we don't want it, then I don't want to do it, because it's, once I put it in, it's hard to get it out.
Well, I don't have a problem with the concept. I just want to see the legislation.
Yeah. So I think we're okay passing it
The
on the
concept's
5th.
fine.
Yeah, I think we're okay passing it on the 5th. But yeah, you don't have the legislation. It wasn't in the packet. So
We would need a special on the 5th then.
Yes. That's okay.
So,
We have, you want me to get the copies? I have the
Fifth would
copies
be-
in my
Well,
office.
I would say it's,
The only There's a copy in it.
I don't have it.
How come I have one in mine?
Hold on.
No, that's
Where is
for
it?
118.
115?
It's just 118.
If it makes a difference to anybody, I would not support
Yeah.
introducing it
I don't-
tonight and
I don't
passing it
have it.
tonight
Yeah,
myself. but-
I'm fully on board with that, Mr. Towsley. I think it's too much confusion. We don't have the legislation. I think we just
We
wait
do.
till the next,
We do have legislation. I'm
That's
sorry.
it.
That's
The
okay.
council does.
I've got it.
the council does have it?
Have it.
118, one's up.
I got it in my
Well,
packet.
I've got it in my packet, so.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good. Never mind then.
I don't see it, but-
We still don't need to pass tonight, so it's up to you guys how you want to proceed.
All right, well,
Let's
we'll just,
see.
I don't have it.
So maybe we take a vote to put it on the agenda,
Which I think they're going to do.
and then if it's affirmative, all 7 voting, then I'm going to take that there's a good possibility that a majority will vote to
Create the funds.
create
Right.
the fund.
yeah, and then we can just go ahead
I'll
and.
go ahead and set them up so I can have budget books ready for next week.
And then take your time on the readings.
Would we need to pass it on the 5th, or could we do it on the
12th is fine.
12th?
12th is fine. Yeah.
All right, and we'll look at doing that. We call the roll
What are we,
to add it.
To the 5th. To add it to the 5th?
No,
Tonight for first reading.
to
Tonight
tonight's
for first
agenda
reading,
for the
okay.
first reading.
Yeah, they're right here.
I know we had the motion second, but I wasn't sure.
We
I think I did call the
We
roll.
we did, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because,
Okay.
So it'll just be on for first reading
Yeah,
tonight.
given the
Let's
level of
give it its first
confusion,
read.
I think we should not.
Yeah, and just
proceed
to
any
be
further.
clear,
Yeah.
I do have it in here.
Okay.
It was just up front.
yeah, it's in the front.
And I had gone back to the legislation and didn't actually see it there. So in any event, I haven't had a chance to look at it, so.
Yeah. I don't think it made the agenda that got published
Right.
to the media and to the public, so I would
Okay.
not feel comfortable moving forward based on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right, the next item under Committee of the Whole, we have an ordinance to proceed with the Cleveland Maslin Road improvements. This is Phase 2 and 3. Mr. Fowler, would you?
This is standard legislation. ODOT requires in order for us to proceed with the project. While I know we had some discussion, we don't need a meeting on the 5th, we do need this passed on the 5th. So I would ask that we have a special council meeting on the 5th to pass this. This needs to be at ODOT District 4 by the 9th in order for the project to proceed. So I'm asking, this is, again, standard template ODOT language, but of course, we just got it last week, and they're asking us to rush it through. I'm not asking for it passed tonight, but if we could have a special council meeting on the 5th to address this agenda item, I would be appreciative.
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce that we did receive the request from ODOT early last week, and there's a November 9th filing deadline, so just to confirm that.
Mr. Pilat, you had asked me to put this on tonight's agenda, so that it is on the agenda, this piece of legislation.
This one I saw in my packets.
The
So
118 is,
I'm
yeah.
good. I saw this one.
Right.
It is added to, yeah.
Yeah, I see that. All right. Any questions on this? We can just look at having a special on the,
Did we get that language corrected?
Yes. Thank you. 40 instead of 4.
we can look at just giving it a first read, adding it to tonight's agenda, giving it its first read, and then we'll look at a special on the 5th to pass it.
Waiving readings and emergency then?
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions on this? All right, then I move to add ordinance 118 to tonight's agenda with emergency, with the intent of having a special on the 5th, waiving the 3rd at that time,
This is the first
or
two.
waiving the 3rd at that time.
I'll second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pilat?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Consideration of minutes of the regular council meeting of October 9th, 2018. Any corrections, additions, or alterations to those minutes? Hearing none, they will be accepted as submitted. Any corrections, additions, or alterations for the minutes of the committee work session meeting October 15th, 2018? Hearing none, those will be accepted as submitted. Reports from officers, boards, and commissions, starting with the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I do not have a report. However, I do have public service announcements that I will hold till the end of the meeting.
Mr. Fowler?
There. Something that has been a point of consternation for, well, at least as long as I've been here. We have pulled a purchase order for a demolition contractor to demolish AP Gas in the coming weeks. So hopefully you'll see that facility demolished in the coming weeks. Part of the budget we plan on rolling out in the next few weeks. We will have some items in there that will require further discussion. Like Ron said, the economic development account is something that we feel strongly we should have some discussions as we move forward. And lastly, I think Reimer Road's buttoned up finally. Everything's done. So all our road projects have been completed for this year. And we are working on next year at this time. That's all.
Mr. Fowler, you did say AP station, right?
AP Gas, yes.
Are we going to be able to use the money we'd gotten before to do that?
We have not addressed it with the land bank. We had some money budgeted, and rather than go through the bureaucracy of the land bank, we just decided to take it down. It's only $3,500. I say that only. But ultimately, our goal is to try to get that money recouped.
Right, and the land bank process is really about the underground tanks that are there, and we're still working. I know it seems like it's ages, and I don't disagree that people are frustrated. It's not bureaucracy; it's waiting for the US EPA to issue guidance documents, which is taking some time and giving some clarity to the land banks to make sure they're immune from liability if they go in and pull these tanks. They have oral assurance that's true, but they're waiting to see something in writing that says they're not going to be liable under the statute if they pull these tanks out of the ground on behalf of the city of Norton. So this addresses the above ground improvements. The tanks still have to be addressed, but we're still working with the land bank on that process.
So we'll still have that money back that we'll be able to use for something and possibly this.
The existing grant money we have, yes.
What was that, 85 or something like that?
Yeah, I can't remember how much. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys staying on top of this. I know that myself and probably many of the other council members, as well as residents, have been bugging you guys about this AP gas station being an eyesore and needing to be
Dealing
taken
with it
down.
since I've been on council.
I guess it brings up a question that I had before. Can we require companies that are establishing here within the city to essentially put up a bond to protect us from having to go through this in the future if they would go bankrupt, if something happens to that business and we have to go in and clean up that site? Is there some way that we can protect ourselves?
Probably need to talk about some more and figure out what kind of businesses. I mean, if it's just gas stations, I don't know the answer offhand, but
Okay.
that's.
If we could look into it and see if there's some way to help protect the city and the residents.
Don't we have that, a stipulation on the dumps like on Akron, Wadsworth, and up on Summit? Or is that McCoy? McCoy, maybe? They've got some kind of something written in there, but I believe that's through the health department. It might be something we can initialize.
Yeah, they're pretty regulated by the state and the health departments, but we can look at it. I mean,
All right.
it's nothing hurts it to look at it.
All right. Anything from,
Mr. Pellet, I have one quick question on the AP gas station. What happens to the property then after the
So I mean, we're still trying for the remediation. The key to that entire parcel is the remediation, and without having US EPA on board, we're not able to move forward. This was a step that we took upon ourselves to say that we didn't appreciate the appearance. We are demolishing the building under our building code. It was just truly a step that we felt we had to show that we're making an improvement to that parcel. And then ultimately, the next step is to get it cleaned. Once it's cleaned, it'll be on the ownership of the land bank, at which time we would try to market it to someone for redevelopment.
And would we assess those costs is probably a question.
Yeah, we will assess
So
the
we're gonna-
cost to the property.
So we'll assess the costs on the demolition to the property. The property is tax delinquent, and the land bank under statute could take the property, and that's the issue, and they can use their procedure, and the property owner has the right to redeem that property if they come up with the tax dollars and if they want it. So there's a procedure in place, a whole statutory scheme in place to protect the property owners in that situation. The issue is the land bank doesn't want to move forward with acquiring the property until they have assurance from the US EPA that they're not liable for the cleanup of those tanks. That's the holdup. So land bank can take the property that's tax delinquent, we can add our costs, but until they decide they want to take the property, the land bank does, there's no way to divest that property.
Would it be reasonable to say that the current owner will not own it when it's all done?
If the land bank does it's a foreclosure procedure. So if they foreclose on the property for the tax delinquency, then the land bank would become the owner. The owner would no longer be the owner. But that's not different.
So the
than-
short answer is we really don't know.
Yeah, so the owner could come forward and pay the taxes, and then the land bank would have no right to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the protection that, so the remedy for not paying your taxes from a government perspective is they could take the property and sell it and then pay the taxes off. The property owner always has the right to come forward and pay the taxes, and if they do that, then the foreclosure is gone, right? The land bank no longer has a right to take it.
So we could be making an improvement on their property,
We could be
which I'm
making-
not necessarily against because it's still.
We would
helps-
still assess it to them.
They still have to pay our costs, too.
Right.
Yeah, they still have
I'm
to
just
pay
trying
our
to be clear.
delinquency. Yes.
Just so you're clear, we will assess time, the time not all of our time, but a lot of our time that we spent. Any costs we had to do some surveys. So the surveys will be attached to the assessment and the demolition. So we would get back, hypothetically, under his procedure, if they redeem the taxes and say, I want to own my property.
It's all the liens. And that
Right,
includes,
all the
and that
liens.
includes our costs. So they would have to
Right.
pay our costs, they'd have to pay the back taxes with the interest and everything else. So if they pay us back, then we get our money back.
Right, okay.
And then
Thank
they
you.
have their property again. So or continue
Personally,
to own
I'd
their
like to
property.
see them step forward.
I think there's a lot of cities and townships and villages who feel the same way because they have a number of properties
I'd love to see them
in
come forward.
Ohio. So
we'd know where they are and who they are.
we know who they are and where they are, but there's just nothing anyone can do about it.
All right. Anything from your office?
Nothing else.
Okay. All right. Mr. Messner?
Nothing at this time.
All right. We have no public hearings this evening. Introduction of new legislation, Resolution 109 for its first read. Falls under my committee, so I'd like to offer that for its first reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
A resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Summit County Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the Summit County Fiscal Officer and declaring an emergency.
Kind of a boilerplate resolution that we take care of every year, acknowledging the rates of the tax levies. So at this time, I'll move to waive the second and third on Resolution 109, 2018.
A second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
At this time, I move to adopt Resolution 109, 2018.
A second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Next item on tonight's agenda is Resolution 110, 2018, also under my committee. I'd like to offer that for its first reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
A resolution requesting the county auditor to advance taxes from the tax year 2018 collections payable in 2019 pursuant to Section 321.34 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency.
Again, currently, this is kind of something that we do each year. It just allows the city to get the tax dollars as they're collected from the county. So,
Yeah, Mr. Peel, I just wanted to clarify what you just said. That's it's taxes that are already levied. It's nothing new.
correct.
Right.
And it's just something that we apply for each year, so that way we can get the tax dollars in here and use them for operations. I will move to waive the second and third readings at this time.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
This time I move to adopt Resolution 110, 2018.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Next item on tonight's agenda, also under my committee, I'd like to offer Ordinance 111, 2018 for its first reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a letter agreement with the Auditor of State to provide gap conversion services to the city and declaring an emergency.
This time I move to waive the second and third readings on Ordinance 111, 2018.
Second.
Motion second to waive the second and third. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes.
Just to clarify, Mr. Messner, you said this was time sensitive, correct?
That's correct. I need to have it in before the 26th.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
This time I move to adopt Ordinance 111, 2018.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
And just kind of for the public's general information, where as a council, as administration tries to get information to us in a timely manner so we can go ahead and have our three readings, have the information out there in the public eye for a while before we actually vote on it. There are certain times where other organizations throughout the county and state and federal government, they just don't allow for it. They give us information and they want answers back right away to make them happen, and that's what kind of dictates a lot of times where we have to waive readings on certain items. So might seem like a lot, but as we get closer to the end of the year, you're going to see probably more of these time-sensitive type ordinances come forth. And it's not that somebody in the administration dropped the ball. It's just, that's just the nature of the beast of where we get the information from the other organizations, and they want us to act in a very timely manner that's shorter than what we would like to have for our residents.
Mr. President.
Yes.
I'd just like to add that in this legislation's case, we want to move on this and get it passed because we're actually keeping the same price that we've had for, the last 5 years. This will lock us in for the next 2 at this price, which is very likely to be going up.
All right. Moving on, ordinance 112. Mr. Grant?
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to offer ordinance number 112, 2018 for its first reading. I ask the clerk to read it.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with GPD Group for professional engineering services in connection with the design of the improvements for Worcester Road and declaring an emergency.
That's first reading only.
Next item, ordinance 113, 2018. Mr. Towsley?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to offer ordinance 113, 2018 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance adopting medical coverages and rates for employees of the City of Norton and declaring an emergency.
First reading only. Thank you.
We have added resolution 114, 2018. I'd like to offer that for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
A resolution supporting the Summit County Children's Services Issue 8 on the November 6, 2018 ballot, seeking voter approval of a 2.25 mil renewal levy with a 1 mil increase and declaring an emergency.
This time I move to waive the second and third readings on resolution 114, 2018.
I'll second.
Motion and second to waive the readings. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Karen?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Point of order, second, please. On the piece of legislation that you just passed on the, compensation or the
Engineering design.
healthcare, healthcare.
It was just a reading.
Okay.
Just a reading.
Yeah, but what number was
Ordinance
that?
113.
113.
We don't have that on
We
ours.
don't have that. That's okay. We'll put it on. That's okay.
It's on a need-to-know basis only.
Well, somehow it was averted from our packet, so, but it's okay. Compensate.
All right, well, let me finish this one here.
Okay.
And then we'll go back, maybe address that a smidge more.
Okay. It just wasn't on the agenda.
Motion and second, we had our roll call there. So at this time, I move to adopt Resolution 114, 2018.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Karen?
Yes.
Mr. Towsley?
Abstain.
Ms. Whipke?
No.
We got the legislation, just not on the agenda. That's,
And Ms. Finney, we'll make sure that we get a copy of that resolution over to your office. Carrie, you have her email.
I do. Thank you.
Going back then, you say your copy doesn't have 113 in it?
we
Just
have the
on the
legislation.
agenda, it's in the packet.
It's in the packet,
113,
okay.
114 is in the packet. Yes.
All right. Added resolution, added ordinance 115. I'd like to offer it for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
I think you meant 118.
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
They're in the front.
An ordinance establishing Fund 200 compensated absences and 27th pay.
All right, and we're just going to give that its first read. I'd like to offer ordinance 116, 2018 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance establishing Fund 511 Eastern Road Waterline.
First reading only. I'd like to offer ordinance 117, 2018 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance establishing Fund 201 Economic Development.
I'd like to offer ordinance 118, 2018 for its first reading, and ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance determining to direct the Director of Transportation to proceed with the improvement of Cleveland-Maslin Road and declaring an emergency.
And you needed this by the 5th, so we can have a special.
By the 9th, as long as we have a special on the 5th, we'll be
Okay. All right, so we'll leave that as first reading only for that. We'll go ahead and plan for a special following the next committee of the whole work session.
Okay.
Introduction of prior legislation, ordinance 98, 2018. It's come to my attention that we are looking to maybe make some adjustments to that, to the timeline that's needed, and the pieces, all the pieces, parts that go together with that. So at this time, I'm going to move that we table this.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
All right, next item, ordinance 102, 2018. Mr. Towesley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 102, 2018 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the administrative officer to execute and deliver a memorandum of understanding between the City of Norton and the Ask Me Office and Clerical Unit of the city and declaring an emergency.
On this, I have a question for you, Mr. Messner. Would it benefit you, as we're going to be taking a vote on ordinance 99 in a few minutes on the Ask Me service workers, would it benefit finance for this, them both be passed on the same evening, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. This is for 2019.
Okay, that'll be second reading only then. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, amended ordinance 103, 2018. Mr. McGlone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer amended ordinance 103, 2018 for its second reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the lease purchase of TASER X26P units and accessories for the police department and declaring an emergency.
I move to waive the third reading for ordinance, amended ordinance 103, 2018.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, we're doing this. A lot of council members had some questions at the last committee meeting. I think everyone got them answered, and I think everyone's pretty well satisfied the way the ordinance reads now.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
I move to adopt amended ordinance 103, 2018.
And I'll second. Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Yes, this is going to be a lease purchase. It's going to be 5 years. We'll make our first payment of $7,288. The next 4 years, $7,900 to equal out to $38,888.
It'll give us, our police department, the necessary tasers that they need so they can have their own individual tasers that are assigned or basically associated with their badge and stuff. So just a lot safer in the long run, a lot more accountability. Roll call, please.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Ordinance 104, Mr. Towesley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 104, 2018 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend section 1066.04 D6 of the codified ordinances of the City of Norton, Ohio.
Thank you. Second reading only.
Ordinance 105, 2018, Mr. Kernan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 105, 2018 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing real property tax exemptions with respect to certain real property within the City of Norton Community Reinvestment Area for the purpose of encouraging economic development within that area, authorizing the administrative officer to execute and deliver a community reinvestment area tax abatement agreement with TRK Legacy Holdings LLC and declaring an emergency.
That's for a second reading only tonight.
Ordinance 107, 2018, Mr. Krant.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to offer ordinance 107, 2018 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of agreements with Valley Freightliner and Western Star Incorporated for the purchase of a 2019 Freightliner M2-106.
That's second reading only. Thank you.
Ordinance 108 falls under my committee. I'd like to offer ordinance 108, 2018 for its second reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a memorandum of understanding with the city of Barberton to apply for water supply revolving loan account funding and declaring an emergency.
That is second reading only. Ordinance 99, 2018, Mr. Tousley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 99, 2018 for its third reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the administrative officer to execute and deliver a memorandum of understanding between the City of Norton and the Ask Me service workers of the City of Norton and declaring an emergency.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 99, 2018.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 99, 2018. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes. Next item, ordinance 100 falls under my committee. I'd like to offer ordinance 100, 2018 for its third reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance declaring the improvements to certain real property within the city to be a public purpose, describing the public improvements to be made to directly benefit such parcels, exempting such improvements from ad valorem real property taxation, requiring the owner of the improvements to make service payments in lieu of ad valorem real property taxes, and establishing a municipal improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of the service payments in lieu of ad valorem property taxes, all pursuant to section 5709.40, 5709.42, and 5709.43 of the revised code and declaring an emergency.
This time I move to adopt ordinance 100, 2018.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Carratt?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. President, before we
Yes.
go on this TIF money, do we have a fund for that, or are we going to be using this, the 117?
The
created.
legislation creates orders the finance director create a municipal tax improvement increment fund. It's what's required under the revised code under 570942. You're required to create that fund. So we'll have to get a number for that, but that fund will be created. And any TIF the city does, the service payments that the city receives all have to be deposited within that fund.
Okay.
So
this is going to be a separate
fund
fund,
altogether, a new fund on the books.
and then anybody else that we get involved in the TIFs, they'll all be able to go on there under their own line, I
Yeah,
take it?
it'd be a separate line item, so you could account for the revenue separately, so we know how to spend it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any unfinished business?
Yes, Mr. President, I probably should have brought this up under administration, but I apologize for being out of order if I did. But, Mr. Fowler, you indicated that the road projects have been completed for now, which is wonderful to hear. I've got a question about some of the Nash Heights roads, some of the things. Have those all been completed, or are there some things still left undone? There were a couple things brought to my attention, people still waiting for some resolution. Are they still pending?
The asphalt itself is done.
Okay.
So driveways are separate from the asphalt.
Okay.
So
Is there something still going on in Easton Road, the northern part of Easton Road, where the dip is? And
that's
Or is that separate?
That is not, that's not part of Nash Heights.
Right, I
project.
understand.
That was the service department.
Okay.
And that is a discussion we had with Larry last week.
Okay.
And we're trying to find a resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other unfinished business? New business?
I'd like to, since we were talking about a resolution for the Children's Services, I'd like to also recommend voting no on issue 1 this fall. It's a very, very important issue. And if you read the pamphlet that came in everybody's boxes, I hope, I think you'll agree by reading the argument against and the arguments for. If you read the arguments against, I think they highly override the arguments for. I'd just like to recommend no vote, period.
Anyone else? Kind of, as we've alluded to, we still on target for the 5th, having a budget. All right, so kind of plan for some longer evenings and
Council President,
as
if I
much
may
as
just.
much as we can keep our plate kind of clean from administration during those next 3, that would be great.
We're asking that council consider, we'll have the budget to you, that won't be an issue. What we're asking is that you actually have a council meeting where we can clear all these off on the 5th and then do the budget hearing the following week.
Okay.
And we'll withhold everything else that's coming to council from that until after the 12th. And we'll be getting some other things for the agenda that'll need to be added for discussion that night to you and the council clerk.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and the earlier that we can get the budget and start looking at it, at least that way we can start looking through it, looking at any questions that we may have, and then we can contact you and kind of go from there.
So Scout, do I understand, will we be getting the books that weekend before the 5th?
My hope is to have them to you by next Monday,
Okay.
unless something comes up. I mean, I've met with Justin and Robert and the mayor. We've tweaked. I've got all the final ones from the department heads. They've made their final tweaks. I just need to get these 3 funds set up and the associated accounts with those so that I can get them in the budget in that. Once I do that, I can print the books. My hope is to have them to you by next Monday.
Okay.
And then my hope is whenever we start the budget hearings, probably the first night, we'll bring the big 3, fire, police, service. Bring the department managers in. Those are the ones that are the big hitters. And we'll just start there. If we run out of time and council gets tired and we don't get to one of them, that'll be the first the next time around.
Okay.
That's my plan.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we need to have a extra meeting in there or in lieu of a regular council meeting or something, have a work session
Workshop
to
night.
to cover part of the budget, then that's what we'll do to make sure that we get through it. All right, any other new business? Public service announcements, Mayor?
Thank you again. I just want to announce that Saturday, October 27th, we have the Norton Fire Department Pancake Breakfast that starts at 7, goes till noon, and then we have citywide trick-or-treat that evening from 5 until 7 p.m. So hopefully all the little beggars will be out having a good evening. So.
All right. Earlier, over the last couple of weeks, I've been in touch with Tom Bullock. He is Susan Moran Palmer's campaign manager. She's running for Congress, and they've asked to be able to come speak to council and to the residents of Norton to kind of just give a little background on themselves and so forth. And I see she just arrived, so she's running probably ragged about right now, getting closer and closer to the election date. Anybody have any issue with that?
Who is she?
She's running for Congress.
Who?
She can explain.
Oh,
If you
Republican
would-
or Democrat? Democrat. Never heard of you, but more power to you.
If you would just give your name and address to the stenographer.
Susan Moran Palmer, 30975 Hilliard Boulevard, Westlake, Ohio, 44145. It's a pleasure to be in Norton. Thank you for the invitation. I'm somewhere over 500 events since I started running in January, so I never cease to be amazed by cutting through different areas, Fair Lawn to Medina, then down here I always pick another city that I haven't seen, another little village that I haven't been through. I think it's very important for people who run for office to get out in front of their voters. I don't believe in hiding. I don't believe in not answering questions. Everyone, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, has a right to ask me any question they want and get a straight answer. I grew up in Youngstown, so that's part of the straight shooting that comes with that. Dad was IUE, Mom was SCIU. I've been fortunate to climb the ladder out of Youngstown. We had 22% unemployment the year I graduated high school. So climbing that ladder, School of Hard Knocks is definitely my background. 100% health care, started out working in hospitals many years ago, then worked for 2 larger companies selling pacemakers and defibrillators, then I owned and operated my own medical consulting firm, all here in our district. And no matter how disparate the district is, I was within it the entire time. I've also served on the board of Providence House, which is a near West Cleveland child crisis center for families that are in need, whether it's drug abuse or homelessness, a safe place to put your kids where they can stay up to 90 days. I was active on their board for 12 years, and I'm still on their legacy board, which means I have to raise money for them. That's my goal in life. I've been married for almost 20 years. I have 3 teenage boys eating me out of house and home, all public school students, and I am your community. I am a member of your community. I've been here for 20 years. I do not play professional football. I played powder puff, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't count. But as people compare and contrast with who is available to you to run, for those of you that don't know, Jim Renacci is not running for the seat again. He was our congressman for the last 8 years. He's not running for Congress, so you have 2 brand new people, and you have to get us out there and ask us questions. I think being in front of voters when you have 2 brand new people who have never held office is very important to ask us questions. So I'll open it up to anybody who has any questions for me.
Anyone have any questions?
I know it's been a long meeting.
I'll give you one.
Sure.
What was your motivation to run for office?
My husband and I are in a split marriage. He's Republican and I'm Democrat. So when we went to look who was running, we were shocked at our choices, literally shocked. On the Republican side, we had someone that was too conservative for us on a religious basis, and then a football player who hadn't lived in Ohio in 11 years. That didn't work for either one of us. We looked on the Democratic side, and there was a lot of grassroots candidates, really, really nice guys, but they just didn't have the bandwidth. You know, just no campaign staff, no serious campaign. And again, we were just shocked at our lack of choices. So right after Thanksgiving, my husband and I sat down and had that conversation. He knew he would have to step up 100% on the parent level, and we stepped into the race at the end of January.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned health care, so I'm glad to hear that. I approached Congressman Renacci about 2 years ago about an issue in Ohio, and it's a national issue also. It has to do with pharmacy, of which I own a pharmacy. I wasn't really given much more than a time of day on that issue. The next year, which was last year, we lost 165 pharmacies that were independently owned in Ohio. They were closed because of the insurance industry, which has been very aggressive. If you've read anything from the Columbus Dispatch this past year, you're well aware of it. I don't think we can survive a whole lot longer when an industry self-polices and do it for self-gain. That needs to be addressed. Not much of a question. I would sure love to see you do something.
I appreciate that. Probably one of the things I'd put in place immediately, and we should be able to do it immediately, is putting pharmaceutical drugs out to bid. Okay? Like you do with any other government contract. You guys can't pick who builds your bridge. You put it out to bid, and it's a competitive bid, transparent government, taxpayer funded, but truly transparent. And that's what we need to do with pharmaceutical drugs. We have got to get away from the donor democracy we have turned into on a pharmaceutical level. And it's not just the drug companies, it's the distributors that move the drugs around, it's the insurers and all the opaque insurance contracts we all live with every day. My sons are on Accutane for acne, and I can't get a different price at each pharmacy. It's shockingly the exact same price at every pharmacy for every brand that makes it. And that's the opposite of a free market. It's opposite of competition. And we have to break through that monopoly without question.
It's more of a question of who's doing the billing, transmissions, the PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers. When I came to this county in 1978, there were 60 independent pharmacies. There's 2 left. I'm one of the 2.
Yeah, and I grew up with independent pharmacies as well. That's who we always went to. So.
Right. Anyone else have questions?
I'll be around afterwards if anyone. Oh, sure.
Yes.
Hi. Hi.
What are your opinion on issue 1 and why?
Yeah, it did come up at a couple paper endorsements. I do believe we need to revisit.
Could you talk into the microphone,
Sure.
please?
I do believe we need to reissue. Issue 1, for those that don't know, is constitutional amendment to the state constitution to change the jail sentences for personal drug use possession type of laws. I don't like that it's a constitutional amendment. I don't have any trouble with a referendum forcing the legislation to do their job, but a constitutional amendment cannot be changed or formed or have any input from the judiciary or anybody else. So for that reason, I do not support issue 1.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything else? Hearing nothing, no other material to come before council. Meeting adjourned, 8:20.
Done? Sign them all?